When my husband passed away, I secretly kept the $17 million inheritance and the mansion in Cancun that was in my name. Upon returning from the wake, my daughter-in-law threw my suitcases into the garage. "Now you're going to share the dog bed." I simply nodded. Then I decided to do something that. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story to the end and comment from which city you're watching. That way, I can see how far my story has come. My name is Lourdes, and I am 60 years old. I never thought that the most painful day of my life would also become the day I would discover who my family really was. It was a rainy Tuesday in October when we laid Roberto to rest. 42 years of marriage vanished under that cold drizzle that seemed to mock my pain. Throughout the ceremony, I maintained the composure that Roberto would have expected of me. I greeted the mourners, thanked them for their condolences, and held my grandchildren's hands when they cried for their grandfather. Patricia, my daughter-in-law, stayed by my side during the funeral, but not for support. Her calculating eyes constantly scanned the mourners, as if she were cataloging who might be useful to her in the future. When the pastor mentioned Roberto's generosity toward his family, I saw his jaw clench. Marcus, my son, seemed lost in his own world of grief, oblivious to his wife's machinations. The ride home was silent. I rode in the back seat of Marcus's Mercedes, watching the Houston streets, which had been my home for decades, pass by. Patricia drove with cool efficiency, her perfectly manicured nails occasionally tapping on the steering wheel. Every now and then, she exchanged meaningful glances with Marcus through the rearview mirror. When we arrived at the house, a beautiful two-story property in River Oaks that Roberto and I had purchased 20 years ago, I noticed something odd. My suitcases were stacked by the garage door. At first, I thought someone had mistakenly moved them during the funeral arrangements. "What are my things doing here?" I asked, pointing at the 3 worn leather suitcases that contained the little I'd packed to stay with them for a few days after the funeral. Patricia stopped in her tracks, turning to me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Lord, I thought it was obvious. Now that Papa Roberto's gone, things are going to change a bit around here." Marcus looked uncomfortable, avoiding my gaze as he nervously smoked. "Mom, it's just that Patricia and I have been talking, and what Marcus is trying to say," Patricia interrupted, her voice taking on a condescending tone, "is that now that we're responsible for you, we need to establish some ground rules. This house is very big, and frankly, maintaining it requires a lot of money." I felt as if I'd been slapped in the face. "Responsible for me, Patricia, this is my house, Roberto and I." It was his house. She cut me off sharply. "But Roberto's gone now. And according to the will we read with the lawyer, everything passes to Marcus as the only son. We're the owners now." The lie tumbled from her lips with an ease that stopped me in my tracks. I'd been present when Roberto wrote his will. I knew exactly what it said, but apparently Patricia had constructed a completely different version for Marcus. "Patricia, I think there's a mix-up," I started, but she held up a hand to silence me. "There's no mix-up, Lourdes. Look, we understand this must be difficult for you. Roberto supported you all these years, and now that he's gone, you obviously have nowhere else to go and no way to support yourself. That's why Marcus and I have decided you can stay." The way she said, "stay," sounded more like a judgment than a generous offer, but she continued, heading toward the suitcases. "You'll have to stay here in the servants' quarters off the garage. The master bedroom is ours now, and the kids need their own spaces. We hope you understand." Marcus finally spoke, his voice barely a murmur. "Mom, it'll just be temporary until we get our act together." I glanced at the room they were referring to. It was small, damp, and had been used mostly for storage. It had a rusty single bed and a tiny window that looked directly out onto the back alley, where garbage trucks rumbled past every early morning. "And naturally," Patricia added, examining her fingernails, "we'll expect you to contribute to the household. It's not fair that Marcus should bear all the expenses of keeping you. You can help with cleaning, cooking, babysitting when we need you, earn your place here." The humiliation was complete. In the space of an afternoon, I had gone from being the lady of the house to being treated as an unpaid domestic servant. My own grandchildren, Emma, 12, and Dylan, 10, looked at me with a mixture of confusion and pity that broke my heart. That night, as I unpacked my belongings in that dreary room, I sat on the edge of the bed and, for the first time since Roberto's death, cried. I cried not just for him, but for the realization that the family for whom I had sacrificed so much saw me as a burden. What Patricia and Marcus didn't know was that Roberto had been very careful with his finances. For the last 5 years of his life, he had worked tirelessly to secure my future, knowing his heart was weakening. There were accounts in my name, properties only I knew about. And yes, there was a mansion in Cancun he had bought as a surprise gift for our 40th anniversary. He never got around to telling me. I found the papers among his personal documents a week before the funeral, but that night, with the sound of Patricia laughing loudly in my bedroom and Marcus doing nothing to defend me, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to let them think they were in control. I was going to let them treat me however they wanted. And when the exact moment came, I was going to show them exactly who had the real power in this situation. The first 3 months after the funeral were the most humiliating of my life, but also the most revealing. Every day that passed, Patricia showed more clearly who she really was. And I became the silent observer of my own degradation. My routine began at 5:30 in the morning. The room next to the garage was freezing in the winter and stifling in the summer, with no thermostat. I got up before everyone else to prepare breakfast for the family. Patricia had made it very clear that if I wanted to earn my place in the house, I had to prove my usefulness. Lourdes would tell me every morning as she came down the stairs in her expensive silk robe, "Make sure the coffee is ready by 7 o'clock sharp. And Marcus wants his eggs Benedict, not plain. The kids need a packed lunch, and I have that PTA meeting, so I need you to iron my blue dress. Never, please. Never. Thank you." Just curt commands as if I were his personal employee. Marcus had changed completely after his father's death. Where before he had been a considerate man who at least acknowledged my efforts, he now avoided eye contact. When I tried to talk to him about the situation, he always had an excuse. "Mom, I'm really busy with work," he'd say, checking his phone while I poured him coffee. Patricia handles these household things better. I trust her judgment. Her judgment. Her judgment was treating me like I was invisible. One morning, while I was cleaning the living room, I overheard Patricia on the phone with her sister Diane. She was standing by the window, holding a cup of coffee. Coffee I'd made, complaining about her burden. "It's so annoying, Diane. The old lady's here all the time, shuffling around the house like a depressed ghost. Marcus feels guilty, obviously, but I told him we have to be practical. We can't support one more person without them contributing something." He paused, laughing at something his sister had said. "So the old people thing. God, don't you know how expensive those places are? Besides, she cooks decently and keeps the house clean. It's basically free housekeeping. I just have to put up with her sad face every once in a while." I stood frozen behind the door, the cleaning rag clenched in my hands. Free domestic service. That's what I was to her. But what hurt most was watching my grandchildren gradually begin to treat me differently. Emma, who had always been my shadow, now seemed embarrassed when her friends came to visit and saw me cleaning. Grandma whispered to me one day as I folded clothes in the laundry room. "Why do you live in the small room now?" "Mom says it's because you can't afford a place of your own." How do you explain to a 12-year-old that her mother is lying? How do you tell her that the grandmother who used to take her shopping and on vacation is being treated like a servant in her own home? "Things changed when your grandfather died, my love," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But don't worry about me, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Every day that passed, Patricia became crueler and more brazen. She had started inviting her friends to lunch at the house, always asking that I serve the food and clean up afterward. "Lourdes, get more champagne for the ladies." She would call to me from the dining room, as if I were her waiting staff. Her friends looked at me with that mixture of pity and superiority I knew all too well. One afternoon, Brenda Morrison, one of her friends from the club, stopped me in the kitchen. "Excuse me, dear," she said with a patronizing smile. "Could you get me some more ice and maybe some extra napkins?" When I returned with what she had ordered, I overheard part of her conversation with Patricia. "This is such a difficult situation, Pat, but I think you're handling this with such grace. Not every woman would be so generous as to take care of her mother-in-law like that." Patricia sighed dramatically. "It's a sacrifice, Brenda, but Marcus feels it's our Christian duty. Although frankly, sometimes I wonder how much longer we can sustain this situation. The house is expensive to maintain. And now with an extra person. Have you thought about other options?" Brenda asked quietly. "Well," Patricia lowered her voice. "There are some very nice places for seniors here in Houston. Places where she could have people her own age, activities. It would be better for her, actually." My blood ran cold. They didn't just want to humiliate me, they were planning to get rid of me completely. That night, as I lay awake in that uncomfortable bed listening to the sounds from the street, I made an important decision. I had been putting off something I knew I had to do. The next day I would make a call I had been avoiding. Roberto had left everything very organized, but there were documents that only I could access. Accounts that needed my signature, properties that required my attention. I had been so overwhelmed by grief and then by the situation at home, that she had left everything in the hands of the executor of the will. But it was time for Lourdes Torres de Mendoza to stop playing the victim and become who she really was, a woman with resources, dignity, and options. Patricia had made a mistake by underestimating me. She thought she knew the whole story, but the truth was far more complex than her small mind could imagine. The next day, I would begin planning my release, but I would do it so quietly and carefully that no one would suspect a thing until it was too late to stop me. The call that changed everything happened on a Tuesday morning while Patricia was out at the spa and Marcus was at work. The kids were at school, so I had the house to myself for the first time in months. Senora Mendoza, the voice of Fernando Alvarez, Roberto's lawyer, sounded surprised to hear my voice. "I've been waiting for your call. It's been 4 months since the funeral, and there are urgent matters that require your immediate attention." I sat on the edge of my narrow bed, my hands shaking slightly. "Fernando, I've been processing everything. My family told me that the will left everything to Marcus." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Fernando cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Ma'am, I think we need to talk in person. There's some very important information you should know. And it's not appropriate to discuss it over the phone. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" That afternoon, while Patricia thought I was at the supermarket buying ingredients for dinner, I sat down at Fernando's mahogany desk in his office in the financial district. The documents he showed me took my breath away. Roberto hadn't just left me well taken care of, he'd made me a very wealthy woman. "Your husband was extremely meticulous," Fernando explained, showing me document after document. "The house in River Oaks is fully paid for and is in a joint trust that includes your name. Marcus has residency rights as long as you're alive, but the property is yours." My eyes filled with tears. "So why does Patricia say that?" "Because Marcus probably didn't fully understand the terms when she read a draft copy." Fernando shook his head. "Roberto was very specific. He wanted to ensure that you were never vulnerable or dependent. Nobody's." Fernando continued explaining. "There were bank accounts in my name worth several $1,000,000. There were investments in real estate, stocks, bonds. And then came the biggest surprise of all. The property in Cancun," Fernando said, sliding a thick folder toward me. "Her husband bought it 3 years ago as a surprise gift. It's a beachfront mansion, fully furnished, with a maintenance staff. He wanted to take it to her for their 40th anniversary. The photograph showed me a dream house. White walls, high ceilings, huge windows that looked out onto the turquoise ocean. It was bigger and more beautiful than the house in Houston. Roberto had spent a fortune on it." "How much is all this worth?" I asked. My voice barely a whisper. Conservatively, between the properties, investments, and bank accounts, you're looking at close to $17 million. Mrs. Mendoza. I remained silent, processing the information. $17 million. While I slept in a utility room and cooked as a maid, I owned $17 million. Why did Roberto never tell me anything? Fernando smiled sadly. He said he wanted it to be a surprise for when he was gone. He wanted to make sure you had the freedom to do exactly what you wanted with your life, without depending on anyone. I returned home that afternoon, my mind reeling. Patricia was in the kitchen going over bills with a worried expression. "Where were you?" she asked sharply. "You're supposed to be going to the supermarket, you don't have anything in your bags." "I had to run some errands," I lied, heading toward my room. "Well, I hope you brought something for dinner because we have guests tonight. Marcus's boss is coming with his wife, and I need everything to be perfect." That evening, as I served canapés to Patricia's guests and listened to her boast about her house and her lifestyle, a strange calm came over me. For the first time in months, I didn't feel humiliated. I felt powerful. Over the next 2 weeks, I began to observe Patricia more carefully, her habits, her routines, her secrets. And that's when I discovered something that would change everything. It was a Friday afternoon. Patricia had said she was going to her yoga class, but something about her behavior struck me as suspicious. The way she had dressed up more than usual, the extra perfume, the secret smile. On impulse, I decided to follow her. I watched her drive not toward the yoga studio, but toward the UFO hotel downtown. My heart raced as I watched her confidently walk into the lobby. I waited a few minutes, then went in too. Life immediately ended with me sitting at the hotel bar with a man who definitely wasn't Marcus. He was younger, well-dressed, and the way they touched left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. I hid behind a column and watched them for half an hour. I watched as he handed her something. It looked like documents. I watched as she carefully reviewed them, nodding. I saw how they kissed before parting ways. That evening, Patricia came home from yoga with a satisfied smile, telling Marcus about her excellent relaxation session. Over the next few days, I began to pay attention to other details. The calls, whispered phone calls that Patricia abruptly ended whenever someone entered the room, the documents she kept in a small safe in her closet, the frequent trips on errands that lasted hours. One afternoon, while cleaning her room, I found something that confirmed my suspicions. She had left her laptop open, and on the screen was an open email. "My love," read the message from someone named David Carrera. "The divorce papers are almost ready. We just need to wait a little longer to be sure about the inheritance. Once we're clear on how much money there really is, we can proceed. Marcus doesn't suspect a thing, does he?" My blood ran cold. Patricia wasn't just humiliating me and plotting to have me committed to a nursing home. She was plotting to divorce Marcus and take what she believed to be his inheritance. I quickly took pictures of the email with my phone, my heart pounding so loudly I was afraid someone would hear it. That night, as I lay in my narrow bed, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. Patricia had orchestrated everything from the beginning: the humiliation, the cruel treatment, the plans to send me to an asylum. It was all part of her strategy to keep me away while she manipulated Marcus and planned her escape with the fortune she believed he had inherited. But Patricia had made a fatal mistake. She had completely underestimated the wrong woman. The next day I made another appointment with Fernando. It was time to start my own plan, and this time I wasn't going to be anyone's victim. What happened Thursday morning was like a bomb exploding in the middle of the charade we had been living for months. Marcus came home early from work, something he never did, and his face had an expression I'd never seen before. He looked somewhere between confused and furious. I was in the kitchen preparing lunch as usual when I heard him shouting from Roberto's office. "Patricia, come here right now. Come here." Patricia, who was upstairs getting ready for another of her mysterious outings, came running down the stairs. "What's wrong, love? Why are you screaming? What's this?" Marcus had a stack of documents in his hand, and his voice was shaking with anger. From the kitchen, I could see Patricia's face turn pale. Instantly when he saw the papers. Marcus, can I explain? Explain to me what? That you've been lying to me for months. That my mother isn't a burden we have to support, but that she's a millionaire. The silence that followed was deafening. I dropped the knife I was holding, and the sound of metal against the marble floor echoed throughout the house. Marcus continued, his voice getting louder. I found these documents on Dad's desk. Did you know Mom owns this house? Did you know she has bank accounts I can't even calculate? Did you know she has a mansion in Cancun? Patricia tried to compose herself. Marcus, honey, there are obviously some things we didn't quite understand when. No, Marcus yelled, throwing the documents in the air. There are no misunderstandings. It clearly says here that my mother inherited millions of dollars. And you led me to believe she was a poor widow we had to support. At that moment, I knew my charade was over. I walked slowly into the living room, wiping my hands on my apron. Marcus looked at me with an expression of pain and shame that broke my heart. Mom, is it true? You have money. All this time you've had money. Before I could respond, Patricia intervened desperately. Marcus, she tricked us. She made us believe she needed help when in reality I tricked them. For the first time in months, my voice came out loud and clear. Patricia, you told me this house was now yours. You told me Marcus had inherited everything. You put me to sleep in the maid's room. Marcus sat heavily on the sofa, putting his head in his hands. My God, what have we done? What they did, I said, keeping my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding, was showing me exactly who they are when they think they have power over someone. Patricia, realizing her world was falling apart, lashed out in desperation. You manipulated us. You let us treat you like this knowing you had millions. You are a cruel, calculating woman. The irony of her words would have been funny if it weren't so pathetic. Marcus looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. Mom, why didn't you tell us? Why did you let us treat you like this? The question hurt more than all the months of humiliation combined, because my own son, my only real family, had participated in my degradation. Because I needed to know, I answered finally, I needed to know how they were going to treat me when they thought I had nothing. I needed to know if the love they professed was real or just convenient. Patricia turned to Marcus, her eyes flashing with panic. Marcus. You can't believe this. She's trying to manipulate you. We're your family, we're your priorities. But Marcus wasn't listening to her anymore. He stood up and walked toward me. Mom, I don't know what to say. I feel so ashamed. Dad must be turning in his grave. Your father, I said softly. He knew exactly what he was doing when he structured his will that way. He protected me, Marcus. He made sure I never had to depend on anyone. Patricia, seeing that I was losing control of the situation, she played her last card. Marcus, remember everything we've built together. Think of the children. Are you going to destroy our family because of this? That's when I decided it was time to reveal the other truth I'd been keeping. Speaking of destroying families, I said, pulling out my phone. I think there's something else Marcus must know. The color drained completely from Patricia's face. Lord, don't you dare. I showed the photos I'd taken of the emails, the images of her with David Carrera at the hotel. Do you want to tell Marcus about your boyfriend, or should I? The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus took my phone with trembling hands, reading the messages, looking at the photos. When he looked up, the expression on his face was one of pure horror. David Carrera, the real estate broker, Patricia. Have you been there all this time? Patricia began to cry, but they were tears of desperation, not remorse. Marcus, I can explain everything to you. He was just helping me with some legal matters. Legal matters like divorce papers. Patricia's mask finally fell completely. Her face contorted into an expression of pure hatred. Yes, divorce papers. Because I'm sick of living a lie. I'm sick of pretending I love you when you're a weak man who lets his mommy control him." Marcus recoiled back as if he'd been hit. "What? Your precious mommy has been playing us all." Patricia screamed. All pretense of tears vanished. She knew all along he had money. She let us humiliate her because she wanted something against us. She's a manipulator. I didn't say calmly, "I am a woman who learned the truth about the people I thought loved me." Marcus looked between the two women in his life, and for the first time, I saw my son truly see who his wife was. "Get out of my house," he said to Patricia. His voice barely a whisper. "Your house." Patricia laughed bitterly. "It's not your house, you idiot. It's hers. It always has been hers. And now that everyone knows, I don't have to pretend I care about you anymore." She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned to me with a venomous smile. "Congratulations, Lord. You won, but you lost your son in the process, because he's never going to forgive you for putting him through this." The door closed behind her, leaving Marcus and me alone in the most awkward silence we'd ever shared. The days after Patricia left were strange and tense. Marcus had temporarily moved into the guest room, and I had moved back into the master bedroom, my master bedroom. But the house felt like a battlefield where no one knew exactly where the lines stood. Marcus barely spoke to me, not out of anger, but out of shame. I saw him struggling with guilt every time our eyes met. The children, confused by their mother's sudden disappearance, asked questions neither of us knew how to answer. "Grandma, why did Mommy leave?" Emma asked me one night while I was helping her with her homework. "Sometimes adults need time to think about important things," I replied, not knowing what else to say. "But is she coming back?" The question hurt because I knew that, regardless of my feelings toward Patricia, these children loved her and didn't deserve to suffer because of their mother's actions. It was Dylan who, with the brutal honesty of a 10-year-old, asked me the question that broke my heart. "Grandma, Dad says you have a lot of money now. Does that mean you won't be living in the little room anymore?" Marcus, who had been listening from the doorway, came in, his eyes red. "Dylan, go to your bed, please. I need to talk to Grandma." When we were alone, Marcus finally collapsed. "Mom, I don't know how to apologize for this. I don't know how to live with myself knowing what I put you through." I sat next to him on the couch, the same couch where Roberto and I had watched Marcus grow up, where we had celebrated his successes and consoled his failures. "Marcus, what I need you to understand is that I chose to stay silent. I could have stopped everything at any time. But why didn't you? Why did you let us treat you like a servant when you had millions in the bank?" The answer was complex, painful, and I knew he wasn't ready to hear it all, but I was entitled to an explanation. Because I needed to know if you loved me for me or if you loved me because it was convenient. I needed to know if you respected the woman who raised you or if you only respected what I could do for you. Marcus covered his face with his hands. "I failed the test, didn't I?" "You didn't fail it, son, you learned it. There's a difference." Over the next few weeks, we tried to establish a new normal. Marcus was seeing a therapist, trying to process not only Patricia's betrayal but his own role in my humiliation. The boys were slowly adjusting to the idea that their parents weren't going to reconcile. But Patricia wasn't done with us. The first sign was when the children returned from their weekend visit with her, quieter than usual. Emma's eyes were puffy as if she'd been crying, and Dylan didn't want to tell me about his time with his mother. It was Marcus who finally told me what had happened. "He's telling them you destroyed our family," he told me, his voice filled with suppressed anger. "He's telling them you could have avoided the divorce if you'd been honest from the start." Patricia's manipulation wasn't over. Now she was using my grandchildren as emotional weapons. The final confrontation came one Tuesday afternoon. Patricia showed up at the door unannounced, but this time she wasn't alone. She had David Carrera with her, and they both had a folder of legal documents. "Lord," Patricia said with a fake smile. "We need to talk." Marcus wasn't home, and the kids were at school. It was just me against the two of them, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel intimidated. Come in, I said, opening the door for them. This should be interesting. They sat in my living room as if they owned the place. David, a man in his 40s with overly groomed hair and a salesman's smile, opened his briefcase. Mrs. Mendoza, he began. We've come to make you an offer that we hope you'll consider carefully. An offer. Patricia leaned forward, her eyes shining with what she interpreted as a last chance at victory. Look, Lord, I know things between us didn't end well, but we have to think about the children. They need stability, they need both their parents together. And, David continued, we've developed a proposal that we believe would benefit everyone. Patricia is willing to return to Marcus and rebuild the family. But we need certain guarantees. He slid a document toward me. It was an agreement where I agreed to transfer a significant amount of money, $3 million, to a joint account controlled by Marcus and Patricia. In return, Patricia would return home and forgive past transgressions. The audacity left me speechless for a moment. Are you blackmailing me? I finally asked. It's not blackmail. Patricia responded sweetly. It is an investment in your family's happiness. Think about it, Lord. The children would have their parents together. Marcus would be happy and you would have your family intact. That's not worth $3 million. And if I don't accept, David and Patricia exchanged a meaningful look. Well, David, he said softly. Then we would have to explore other legal options. We might question the mental competence you had when you allowed yourself to be treated so poorly with resources available. We might suggest that there are reasons to worry about your ability to make financial decisions. Sound. The threat was clear. If I didn't give them money voluntarily, they would try to take it from me legally by questioning my sanity. Patricia smiled, thinking they had me cornered. Also, he added casually, the kids have expressed a lot of confusion about this whole situation. It would be terrible if they had to testify about their grandmother's erratic behavior in court. There was the final threat. Using my grandchildren against me. I slowly got up, walked to the window and looked at the garden that Roberto and I had cultivated together for decades. Do you know what the saddest thing about all this is? I finally said without turning to them. What? Patricia asked, her voice strained. What do you think you know me? I turned to them and something in my expression made David shift uncomfortably in his seat. Patricia, during all these months that you humiliated me, that you treated me like a servant, that you planned to put me in an asylum to keep money that was never yours, do you know what I was doing? She looked at me suspiciously. I've been learning exactly who you are. And David, I turned to him. You think I don't know you have over $200,000 in gambling debts? You think I don't know that this isn't the first time you've tried to scam an elderly widow? David's face paled. So here's my offer, I continued. My voice taking on a tone of steel. They're going to leave my house right now. Patricia is going to sign the divorce papers without asking for a cent and they are both going to disappear from our lives forever. Or what? Patricia jumped, her mask falling once again. I smiled. A smile that would have made Roberto proud. Or I show the proper authorities all the evidence I've collected about their fraudulent activities, Patricia. And David, I show him your wife. Yes, I know you are married. All the photos of your adventures with married women. The silence that followed was absolute. You guys played with the wrong woman, I said softly. Now get out of my house. 6 months after that day, I am sitting on the terrace of my house in Cancun, watching the sun set over the Caribbean. The water is such a perfect blue that it seems unreal, and the warm breeze carries the scent of the jasmine that grows in my garden. Roberto was right. This place is paradise. The transition was not immediate or easy. After Patricia and David left my house that afternoon with their tails between their legs and their plans in ruins, I had to make the most difficult decisions of my life. Marcus divorced Patricia within 2 months. She didn't fight. He had no choice after evidence of his infidelity and scam schemes came to light. The process was clean and fast, exactly as I had planned. The children were the most difficult. Emma and Dylan deserved an explanation they could understand, one that didn't turn their mother into a complete villain, but also didn't minimize the truth. Adults sometimes make bad decisions when they are scared or confused. I told them one afternoon while we were making cookies together at M and Cocina. Your mom made some decisions that hurt the family and now she has to learn to live with the consequences. But can we still love her? Dylan asked with that simple wisdom that children have. Of course I did, I responded, hugging him tightly. Love doesn't fade away just because someone makes mistakes, but love also means protecting yourself from people who hurt us repeatedly. Marcus fought harder than the boys. Guilt was consuming him and for weeks he begged me to stay in Houston. Mom, let me make it up to you for everything. Let me take care of you like I should have from the beginning. One night, while we were eating dinner alone after the kids had gone to bed, he finally had the conversation we had so long avoided. Do you forgive me? He asked me with tears in his eyes. Marcus, I said, taking his hand, there is nothing to forgive. You were manipulated by a woman who knew exactly how to control your emotions. What matters now is that you learned who you really are when faced with difficult decisions. But I hurt you, I humiliated you, I treated you the way you treated me, the way Patricia taught you to treat me, and when you found out the truth, you immediately wanted to repair the damage. That tells me everything I need to know about the man you are. But despite the forgiveness, despite the renewed love between us, I knew I had to leave. Houston was filled with painful memories and I needed a new beginning. More importantly, she needed Marcus to learn to be independent, to make his own decisions without the influence of a strong woman, neither his mother nor his ex-wife. Why, Cancun? He asked me when I told him my plans. I showed him the photos of the house that Roberto had bought for us. Because your father wanted me to be free to choose my own adventure and this is my choice. Marcus smiled for the first time in weeks. Dad was always smarter than the rest of us, right? We established a plan. Marcus and the kids would come visit me during the summer holidays and Christmas holidays. I would return to Houston for his birthdays and important events. We would have weekly video calls, but we would mainly live our own lives. Before I left there was one last matter to attend to. I established an educational trust for Emma and Dylan. When they turned 18, they would have access to funds for college and settling into adult life. But the money would come with conditions. They had to maintain good grades, do community service, and, most importantly, write annual letters reflecting on the lessons they had learned from this family experience. For Marcus, I transferred the Houston house completely into his name, along with a sufficient fund to support it and raise the children comfortably. I didn't want him to feel dependent on me, but I also didn't want him to struggle financially as a single parent. It's too much, Mom, he protested when he saw the documents. It's not too much. It's exactly what your father would have wanted. The day I left Houston, Marcus and the kids took me to the airport. There were no dramatic tears or heartbreaking goodbyes. There was a peace in all of us that we hadn't felt in years. I'm going to miss you, Grandma, Emma told me, hugging me tightly. I'm going to miss you too, my love, but now we have something to look forward to. Your beach vacation. Dylan handed me a letter he had written. It's so you don't forget us, he said seriously. I opened it when the plane took off. In his childhood writing he had written, Dear Grandma, thank you for teaching us that strong people are those who help others, not those who hurt. We love you. Now, 6 months later, my life has a completely different rhythm. I get up when I want, not because someone else needs breakfast. I walk the beach every morning, something I was never able to do when I was constantly serving others. I've started taking painting classes, something I've wanted to do for decades, but never had the time. My house is full of life in ways I never expected. Maria and Jose, the couple who maintains the property, have become dear friends. Their grandchildren come to visit me on the weekends and I teach them English while they teach me better Spanish. I have started doing volunteer work at the local hospital, helping translate for American tourists who need medical attention. It is rewarding to use my life experience to help others, but on my own terms. Marcus calls me every Sunday and our conversations are now real, honest. He tells me about his dating. He has started dating again, very cautiously. and about the children's achievements. I tell him about my adventures, my new friends, my plans for the future. "Mom," he told me last week, "you sound so happy." "I am, son, for the first time in years." "I am." Patricia tried to contact me once, about 3 months after I moved. The text message was predictable, a mix of self-pity and a last-ditch attempt at manipulation. He said he had reflected on his mistakes and wanted to make peace for the sake of the children. I deleted it without responding. Some people don't deserve second chances, especially when they've already wasted so many first chances. Patricia had repeatedly shown who she was when she thought she had power. That information was all I needed to know about her for the rest of my life. This morning, as I drank my coffee on the terrace, I thought about Roberto, how he had so carefully planned my freedom, how he had known, even without knowing the specific details, that I would need the financial strength to defend my dignity. "Thank you, my love," I said to the wind. "You knew exactly what you were doing." At 60 years old, I have learned something that took me decades to understand. True wealth is not money in the bank, although it certainly helps. True wealth is the freedom to choose how you want to live and who you want to surround yourself with. I have both now, and for the first time in my life, no one, absolutely no one, can take them away from me. This afternoon Emma and Dylan arrive for their spring break. We are going to build sandcastles, look for shells and cook together at Emma's kitchen. I'm going to teach them to sail in the little sailboat I bought last month, and when they ask me about their mother, as they inevitably will, I will tell them the truth, that sometimes life teaches us difficult lessons about the people we love, but that those lessons make us wiser and stronger. The sun is setting now, painting the sky with oranges and roses. I have a dinner to prepare, a book to read and a new life to live. Patricia once told me that she had one. The way she thought. I gained my freedom, I gained my dignity, I gained the wisdom to know exactly what I am worth. And that turns out to be priceless.